Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Hinata Had Neji's Personality. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 21, Unchecked Aggression. What on earth is he made of? No human being could have survived such an impact, Hinata said with wide eyes as Gaara staggered to his feet. The redhead's sand armor, which he had applied earlier in his battle with Rock Lee, was badly cracked and splintered. A stream of blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth, but he appeared to be physically fine despite the aesthetic horror of his appearance. However, in sharp contrast to the seeming lack of physical damage, Gaara's mental state appeared to have been badly shaken by the Hidden Lotus. For the most part, his demeanor was as calm as it always was, but there were visible gaps in his metaphorical armor now. His eyes twitched periodically, and his hands were shaking. If Lee can muster anything more, he might still be able to win this, Naruto said hopefully as his fellow Konoha genin coughed painfully and tried to get to his hands and knees. He's done. This fight is over, Kakashi said bluntly. The blonde opened his mouth to refute the statement, but shut it again as he watched Lee continue to writhe in pain. His muscular structure has been ravaged, and the majority of his bones are broken in some capacity. I would be amazed if he could stand again within a month, let alone this match, Hinata said grimly. Naruto's hands curled into fists as Gaara slowly approached the fallen genin. That was far too close for comfort, Gaara hissed as his sand wrapped around Lee's battered body. Despite the large distance between the combatants and observers, the silence in the room allowed for the redhead's voice to be heard by all. Gaara then flung his foe into the nearby wall with his sand, resulting in a sickening thud as Lee hit the concrete. Stop the fight. Please! He's going to kill him! Tenten, one of Lee's teammates, yelled desperately from the observation deck. When no stoppage came, Gaara resumed his assault of Lee, tossing him about the room viciously. The beating continued for roughly 45 seconds before action was taken. Said action occurred when just as Gaara was about to crush Lee's already broken limbs. As the tendrils of sand crashed down toward the jumpsuit-wearing ninja, it hit a wall. That wall was Guy, who had leapt down from his position in the observation area to save his clearly finished student. Gaara narrowed his eyes at the sudden interruption. Why are you interrupting? This fight isn't finished yet, he asked dangerously. Guy glanced back at Lee, who had lost consciousness soon after his intervention. He is my beloved student, and I refuse to let you kill him, he replied firmly. Gaara stared at him blankly for a moment before shaking his head, beginning to walk away in the opposite direction. I quit, he said bluntly as he strode away. As he made his way back to the observation deck, quiet crackling sound could be heard, prompting both he and Guy to turn around to view its source. Dear God! Hinata whispered with a hand covering her mouth. Naruto, who stood beside her, shook his head in disbelief at the sight below. After all of that punishment, he's still, he said, finding himself unable to finish his sentence as he marveled at the tragic scenario. Conscious? Hate, who had been preparing to declare Gaara the winner due to Guy's illegal intervention, said. The thing that had shaken the composure of all those observing the match was none other than Rock Lee, who had somehow risen to his feet once more. Guy slowly made his way to his battered pupil and put his hands on his shoulders. You don't need to fight anymore, Lee. You've proven your point. The fight is, he began. Before he could finish the statement, the truth of the situation at hand dawned on him. Lee was completely unconscious, having only risen to his feet through an admirable mix of muscle memory and willpower. Lee, what have I done? Look at you, beaten to pieces, and still trying to achieve your goals, Guy said as he broke down into tears. Hate swallowed the second-hand emotion that had built itself into a lump in his throat and pointed towards the retreating Gaara. Due to an illegal interference, Gaara is the winner, he announced. Guy then begrudgingly surrendered Lee to the medical staff who had been waiting to make their way onto the battlefield. As he was carried away, Naruto, Shikamaru, and Hinata all bowed in his direction as a show of appreciation for his Herculean effort against his monstrous foe. What an incredible fight! Difficult to watch for stretches, but still about as brutal and back and forth as a battle can be, Shikamaru said as Gaara silently returned to his viewing position. Hate then called for a 5-minute intermission, much to the relief of all ninja present. To think that Neji-san dominates that boy in training. I find that a bit hard to believe after having seen this fight, Hinata muttered more to herself than to her team. I doubt that he uses the 8 gates in sparring. Baseline strength probably favors your cousin quite a bit, if I had to guess, Shikamaru said. The Hyuga girl nodded in agreement. Good point. Lee-san's sensei did imply that the 8 gates technique was a last resort of sorts, she said. Team 7 continued to discuss the incredible encounter they had just witnessed until Hate called them to attention. Alright, I need you all to look to the monitor again, he called out to them. For the 3rd time that day, the genin all looked to the screen. After the now mundane roulette, 2 names slotted into place. To some, the pairing was shocking. To others, it was as regular as any other. To the few who truly understood, it was begrudgingly perfect. Naruto Uzumaki of Konohamaru will now face Hinata Hyuga, also of Konohamaru. Both combatants, please step forward. Neji's posture immediately became rigid at the sound of his cousin's name alongside Naruto's. It was as though the powers that be had been in a foul mood. Just as I was beginning to think that this day couldn't become any more stressful, he muttered under his breath. Despite his hushed tone, Tenten heard him speak. First our teammate, and now your cousin. It must really suck to have a dog in every race, she said sympathetically. The Hyuga shook his head and sighed. It isn't as simple as me wishing for Hinata-sama's victory. In fact, I'm not sure if this is a fight I think, or even hope, she wins, he said, earning a look of confusion from the weapons specialist. What do you mean? Why wouldn't you want her to win? I know you two have had your differences, but you've spoken pretty favorably of her for the most part, she asked skeptically. Neji chewed his lip absently as Naruto and Hinata made their ways to opposite sides of the room to face one another from. For all of the good qualities she has buried beneath her insufferable superiority complex, that complex is exactly that. Insufferable. I feel that she may need to be knocked down a peg or two. My fear regarding this match is just how emotional it is bound to become. Emotion leads to impulse, and impulse leads to foolish, regrettable decision-making, he explained. Tenten nodded and leaned on the railing. You did tell me something about her being all hung up over something. That something is Naruto, isn't it? She asked. The Hyuga nodded and braced himself for the beginning of the match. Indeed he is. And he has no idea. By the end of this, he'll be shocked and confused. But I trust him to work around it, he said. Tenten chuckled at his response. You have quite a lot of confidence in him despite having never had a conversation with him, she commented. Neji shrugged. Call it a leap of faith. Naruto stretched extensively as he settled into his position opposite Hinata in the enormous room of concrete. The announcement of his opponent had been surprising, but not overly jarring. I would have rather fought somebody else, but I guess I can work with this. She'll bring the best out of me, he thought to himself as he studied his teammate from afar. She appeared to be stretching as well. She looks a little intense. Guess she's just raring to go, he thought as he noticed a defiant scowl on Hinata's face. The pair was then given a signal by Hate. Now, if you are both ready, you may begin, he called out to them. The split second after the proctor had given the metaphorical green light, Naruto was struck with a hard palm strike to his stomach, forcing to back up several steps and cough raggedly. That was cheap, he exclaimed as he weaved his way around Hinata's follow-up strikes. Once he had recreated a bit of space, he focused his vision on the oncoming Hyuga and stepped to his left, creating a space for her to blitz her way through. As Hinata flew past him, Naruto cracked her across the left side of her jaw with a hard, right-handed punch. The strike caused the heiress to stagger, forcing her to regain her balance. Sharp counter. Not bad at all, Naruto-san, she said as she rubbed her face. She then leapt forward and engaged him again, forcing the blonde to block and parry a variety of palm strikes before changing her tactics and planting her shin across the right side of his ribcage. Naruto winced at the debilitating kick to his body, but forced himself to endure the pain and seized the leg that had kicked him. Naruto spun Hinata around several times before flinging her away. The heiress effortlessly landed on her feet and assumed her stance once more. The Jinchuriki then made a hand sign and widened his stance. Shadow clone jutsu, he muttered as 20 duplicates of himself appeared around him. Hinata raised an eyebrow at the development, but did not react further. Naruto then directed the clones towards his opponent. The Hyuga girl charged forward to meet them, dispersing 4 of them on impact. From there, each clone was succinctly destroyed by the superior prowess of Hinata's taijutsu. Once every clone was gone, Naruto entered the fray once more, leading with a driving knee to Hinata's midsection. The strike landed cleanly to her chest and halted her forward charge. Despite the disruption of her momentum, Hinata still drew first blood in the exchange with a hard punch to the Jinchuriki's nose that snapped his head back. Naruto grimaced as his nose stung. Fortunately, he was able to regain his bearings just in time to duck under a kick aimed for the side of his head. As the shin bone sailed over his head, Naruto whipped his head upwards, slamming the back of his head into Hinata's chin. Both ninjas staggered back from the impact, But it was the Hyuga heiress who wore a scowl once they had become stable once again. Naruto stepped forward to re-engage, but was launched backwards well-timed palm strike to his upper chest. Just as his feet touched the ground, Hinata jumped forward to capitalize on her success. This time, however, the blonde had expected the blitz. As Hinata crashed towards him, Naruto ducked down and threw an arcing, short-range elbow that the Hyuga girl ran forehead first into. The strike immediately split her open, sending a small spray of blood from her face. Hinata was forced to take a knee from the impact, allowing Naruto to seize her by the front of her shirt and throw her back. She's timeable. She enters and exits exchanges on straight lines. All I need to do is punish her for it, he thought to himself as Hinata wiped the blood from her forehead. Instead of foolishly rushing forward again, she widened her stance and opened her eyes wide. 8 trigrams, 64 palms, she said calmly before vanishing from sight. The blonde took a step backwards to begin his retreat, but was struck hard in the chest with a palm strike before he could move more than a few feet. As he staggered back, he was struck 2 more times, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, and finally 64 times. He was sent flying backwards to the floor, colliding with the concrete hard. Hyatt-san, I believe this match is over. He won't be getting up any time soon, she said, glancing over her shoulder at the proctor. Haight raised an eyebrow at the statement. That's so? You might want to look back over at him once, he suggested. Hinata frowned and turned her attention back towards Naruto, who had risen to his feet. You know, I thought I was prepared for the pain of getting hit by the gentle fist, but I wasn't. That hurt like hell, the blonde said as he wiped a trail of blood from his lips. The Hyuga girl stared at him in shock as he cracked his neck and dusted himself off. Before you ask, the reason that didn't knock me out is because I did some specific conditioning to toughen my body up in the event that I was paired up with your cousin. I didn't know that we could be matched against teammates, but it also comes in handy against you, he explained as he assumed a taijutsu stance. Hinata clenched her jaw and began to inch forward. The next time I hit you like that, you'll be twitching on the floor. I promise, she said before charging in and engaging the Jinchuriki. As she entered striking range, Naruto intercepted her with a sharp punch to the left side of her skull that turned her head and buckled her knees. Capitalizing on the momentary lapse in defense from his foe, Naruto followed up with a hard kick to the stomach that pushed Hinata back several feet and doubled her over. The Hyuga girl gritted her teeth and scowled at her teammate as she straightened her posture and prepared herself to continue fighting. This must change. I need to alter my approach, she thought to herself as she pushed down her growing frustration. She narrowed her eyes as she studied the blonde. I'll break you, Naruto-kun. Neji took a sip from his canteen of water as he observed the match between Hinata and Naruto with great interest. The match had been fascinating throughout, and quite enlightening on several levels. Who's winning, Neji? I can't keep up with these exchanges, Tenten asked as she tried and failed to properly read the leads and counters of the combatants waging metaphorical war down below. The Hyuga glanced back at her for a moment before returning his attention to the match. As of right now, Naruto-san is well ahead. It is quite clear that he prepared specific things for me. The defensive stance, the backstepping counters, the willingness to throw more than one strike at a time. He's fighting the perfect fight to bring down a member of the Hyuga clan. He's forcing Hinata-sama to come to him. And it's working, he explained as Naruto snapped the heiress' head back with a sharp punch. Tenten nodded. I figured he was ahead. He also looks like the much harder hitter of the two. Every time Hinata steps in, she gets clocked with something that makes her back up. Every time Naruto steps in, he either blocks the strike coming back at him, or he just eats it. She's struggling big time, she said. Neji then flinched as Hinata was staggered with a crushing counter from Naruto that sent her reeling back. The power difference is monumental, and it's wearing on her. Unless she dynamically changes her tactics, I don't like her chances down the stretch, he said. Just as the sentence left his mouth, Hinata caught Naruto ducking to his right with a left-legged kick to the side of his head. The strike opened a cut over his right eye and buckled his knees momentarily. I was wondering when she would finally throw a high kick. Naruto-san always leans to his right when entering range, he said. As though on cue, Hinata slammed her left shin into his head again, having finally found an exploitable opening. Naruto took another backward step to regain his bearings, barely managing to dodge the follow-up palm strike from Hinata. Why was he preparing tactics for you, Neji? These matches are random, Tenten asked as Naruto and Hinata engaged again. I don't know for sure, but I think he was confident in his ability to defeat any other genin without specialized preparation. He was smart enough to know that facing a member of the Hyuga clan requires planning, Neji replied. Both he and the weapons specialist then gasped as Naruto knocked Hinata flat with an enormous counter-punch to the left side of her jaw. Her durability is beginning to fail her in these exchanges, Neji said, his tone conflicted. Tenten bit her lip as Hinata staggered to her feet. This fight is almost over, she said. Little did they know, the battle had only begun, and had yet to reach the peak of its horrific violence. Naruto took a deep breath as he sidestepped Hinata's forward charge. Despite having taken control of the match several minutes previously, his self-chosen tactic of fighting defensively was taxing, as Hinata refused to give him room to breathe. She's insanely durable. I've been hitting her about as hard as I can, and she just keeps coming, he thought to himself as he kicked out one of her legs and sent her crashing to the floor. For the third time that match, he patiently waited for the hyuga girl to rise to her feet. As she climbed into an upright stance, she locked eyes with him and scowled. I'm done with this, she said vaguely. She then allowed herself to relax and leaned her head back. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows as his teammates stood silently before him. What do you mean? He asked skeptically. Hinata did not respond. Instead, she convulsed momentarily before dropping to her knees. What the hell is going on? Naruto demanded as the hyuga heiress breathed deeply and rose to her feet for a second time. For several moments, Hinata's eyes were downcast, hiding her face behind her bangs. Eventually, she turned her gaze up to Naruto. Shall we continue now, Naruto-kun? She asked. The unusually timed, affectionate honorific caught the Jinchuriki's attention immediately, but that was not the detail that caused his blood to run cold. It was the strange markings that had made their way up Hinata's neck and onto her face. Chapter 22, Bloody Horns. Naruto felt a bead of cold sweat drip down his forehead as he and Hinata stared at one another from across the stone floor. Half of the hyuga girl's face was covered in a jagged, black pattern of markings, and they appeared to be glowing a subtle purple color. So that's what Orochimaru did to her. I'm not sure what those markings do, but I don't like the feeling I'm getting from her right now, he thought to himself as he prepared for the inevitable clash between himself and the hyuga heiress. After several moments, said clash occurred, with Hinata blitzing across the space between them and launching a right-handed palm strike at Naruto's head. The blonde was able to rip his head off to his left just before the strike could connect. She's faster. Way faster, he thought to himself as he threw a short right-handed punch as a counter to the palm strike. As she had several times previously, the hyuga girl ran face first into the counter. Unlike before, her head did not budge as the fist slammed into her jaw. Is that all, Naruto-kun? She asked as she mocked him by pouting girlishly. Naruto growled and retracted the punch he had connected with. Why are you calling me that? He demanded as he threw a left-handed punch at her head. Hinata easily leaned back and caused the punch to miss her by inches. As he missed, Naruto fell forward and absorbed a hard knee to his solar plexus, causing him to gasp for air and back up. The better question is, why does it bother you? She asked as she walked forward and prepared to strike him. The blonde narrowed his eyes and parried the jabbing strike the heiress speared towards his face. Now that you mention it, I don't really know. Have any ideas as to why it might bug me, Hinata-chan? He replied, well aware of the dangerous game he was playing. Hinata immediately turned a shade of red that strongly contrasted with the black markings on her face. Instead of responding verbally, she stepped forward and threw a rugged, overhand punch that snapped Naruto's head back and opened a cut underneath his left eye. Shut your mouth, you disgusting insect, she snapped angrily as she bared her teeth. The Jinchuriki winced as he rubbed his gashed face. I never took you for much a puncher, but I guess I've been wrong before. What's your problem? It's actually been a little while since you've insulted me like that, he asked. Hinata stared at him silently for several moments. Am I not justified in being bothered by an unfair reality? She asked vaguely. Naruto sighed and shook his head. Oh please, you don't you jack about unfair. Trust me, he said before charging forward and engaging his teammate. The blonde moved forward as though he was going to throw a punch, drawing a counter from Hinata in advance in the form of the same stepping knee he had been countered with before. As the knee drove towards his abdomen, Naruto pulled his punch back and whirled around, slamming his heel into the side of the heiress' head and sending her staggering back. Naruto then leapt forward and followed up with a hard punch to the right side of Hinata's ribcage that doubled her over. As he prepared to hit her again, the hyuga girl seized him by the back of his head and pulled his face down into a hard knee that shocked his nervous system and froze him in place. Nothing? Oh, that's just rich coming from you, Naruto-kun. You're the source of it all. Don't criticize me, she said as she cracked him with 2 punches on either side of his jaw. Naruto scowled and pivoted around Hinata's next linear attack. He seized her around the waist from behind as she stumbled past him and hoisted her up in the air before slamming her down to the ground. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The source? I haven't done anything to you other than annoy you a little, he said as Hinata scrambled to her feet and broke away from the Jinchuriki. You really are a simpleton. You see the world through a distorted lens. You understand nothing, she said as she dusted herself off and re-engaged the blonde in a furious exchange of leads and counters. Naruto felt his confusion at the change in Hinata's demeanor increase as he ducked and dodged to avoid injury, all while landing counter-strikes of his own. Where is this coming from? Why is she suddenly back to hating my guts? Those markings have something to do with it, but this still sounds like Hinata, he thought to himself as he and Hinata simultaneously landed hooking, left-handed punches to each other's jawlines. They both staggered back, but Naruto was clearly worse for wear as he struggled to regain his bearings. A dark smirk slowly spread across the Hyuga girl's face as the markings on her face slowly spread further across her body. Feeling tired? Good, just wonderful. The blood and cuts on your face are just adorable. I can feel you breaking, she said with a disturbing giggle. Naruto felt his stomach drop at her tone and sinister smile. The situation was beginning to remind him strongly of something he had seen several weeks previously. It's just like that nightmare, he thought to himself as he pushed down his fear. He then made a solemn decision as he staggered to his feet and stared into Hinata's Byakugan. This is the last thing I wanted to do, but I don't have a choice, he thought to himself as his blue irises faded to red. He felt a surge of hot energy pour into his body. He assumed a taijutsu stance and steeled himself. I don't know what that seal is doing to you, Hinata, but I swear to God I'll tear it off your body if it means ending this sick dream. Kakashi looked on with a mix of horror and shame as his students tore into one another at a torrid pace. As Anko had predicted, Hinata's mental state was clearly being affected by the curse mark, and it didn't appear to be on a road of recovery. The fight had become much more brutal and competitive since the Hyuga girl had given into the marking's influence and allowed the seal to spread across her body. Is this what you wanted, Sensei? Shikamaru asked quietly as Naruto spun Hinata's jaw with an enormous punch. The Jonin turned to his student and sighed. How did you find out? He asked. The lazy genin gave him a bored look before turning his attention back to the horrific contest taking place down below. Anko doesn't know how to talk quietly. She and Ibiki were discussing your decision to make this whole thing happen last night. I overheard them, he explained. Kakashi nodded and uncovered his Sharingan to better observe the match. As painful as this may be to watch, it's necessary. This would have happened sooner or later, and it's better for it to happen in a sanctioned environment rather than the battlefield. I would have preferred if Hinata hadn't been marked by Orochimaru, but it can't be helped, he said. Shikamaru growled and jammed a finger towards the battle as Naruto and Hinata exchanged brutal strikes. Necessary? Really? Just because you couldn't find the courage to sit down Hinata and get it through her skull that one person's success isn't her failure doesn't mean this is a good solution, he snapped. Kakashi did a double take as he was glared at by his normally composed student. Let me guess, you were terrified of what would happen if Hinata rejected your advice. You were afraid that she would split and leave the team. You were afraid to lose your highest profile student. Tell me, are you really any better than the damned villagers? You put your own status before Naruto, and now he's suffering for it. Look at his face. He doesn't want to be fighting his teammate. He's holding back so he doesn't hurt her. Shikamaru yelled, gaining the attention of the other genin. The silver-haired ninja stared at his student silently before sighing heavily and turning his gaze back towards the match. I don't expect you to understand my reasoning, Shikamaru. Some things need to be solved through violence. That's human nature, as sad as that is. You have every right to be angry. I don't blame you for that at all, but reserve your judgment until after the fact, he said. Shikamaru opened his mouth to protest, but shut it again and relaxed, realizing there was no point in arguing further. When this is all said and done, nobody is going to be happy. You know that, right? He asked quietly after several moments. Kakashi chewed his lip absently and flinched as Naruto was launched backwards by a dual-handed palm strike from Hinata. Not immediately, no, but given time, this will benefit them both in the long run, he replied. Shikamaru took a sip from his canteen of water. I hope you're right. Both Naruto and Hinata heaved deep breaths as they circled one another while they searched for exploitable openings. They were both battered and bloodied, and their cardiovascular abilities were beginning to fail them both. After another moment or two of tense silence, the genin charged towards one another and clashed together. Hinata struck first with a palm strike that numbed the blonde's left arm. Despite the damage inflicted to the limb, Naruto used the arm to elbow the heiress between the eyes. Sensing that they both had a potentially fading opponent before them, the children extended the exchange one layer further, throwing hard, right-handed punches simultaneously. Naruto won the trade of strikes decisively, as his arms were slightly longer. The added range of his punch allowed him to connect a split second before Hinata and jar her jaw. The punch knocked Hinata to the ground, forcing her to scamper away and stand awkwardly. As she attempted to balance herself, she was sent to the ground again by a kick to her upper chest. Just give up, Hinata. Please, let's be done with this, the blonde reasoned futilely. Hinata growled and climbed to her feet. Every time you open your mouth, my opinion of you sours more. We aren't done until I say we are. I need this, and I refuse to let you rob me of it, she hissed. Naruto's lips tightened into a thin line. Why? Why do you want to hurt me so badly? What changed? You and I were friends, or something close to it, he asked tensely. Hinata's hands curled into fists as she shook at his question. What changed? What changed is that I realize just how inadequate you make me feel. Every time I see you train, you are demonstrably better than you were the day before. You make progress at a rate that just isn't normal. You've improved more in a month than I have in the past half-decade. I cannot accept that. I refuse to roll over and resign myself to the idea that I, an elite member of this society, is inferior to you, the village pariah, she explained as the markings thickened and spread across her skin to fill in the gaps between patterns. What? That's what this is about. Me getting better? You and I are teammates. We should support and cheer each other on. It makes me happy when I see you or Shikamaru improve. What makes you an exception to that idea? Naruto demanded. Hinata shook her head and relaxed slightly as her body was consumed by the curse mark. You don't understand, Naruto-kun. To be born into great expectations. For your only option to be victory. To be viewed as a prodigy is not all it's cracked up to be. For me, loss is not an option. Especially against you. My world falls to pieces if you defeat me here and now. To preserve myself, I'm willing to put aside my shameless affection for you and do everything in my power to put you down. I'm sorry, but I must do this, she said, a trace of genuine emotion finding its way into her voice as her body morphed. I don't want to hurt you, Hinata. Please, don't do this, Naruto begged as the Hyuga girl's transformation completed itself. After a moment of silence, Hinata's body stopped changing. As I said, nothing else matters now but this. Whether you like it or not, I'm going to punish you for disgracing me, she said as she stared into his eyes. Naruto froze as he beheld the girl before him. Her forehead had sprouted small, pointed horns, and her hair had darkened from blue to black in color. Her scara had turned black as well, making her lavender irises defined to the point of seeming to glow. You told me once that you weren't good with people. I figured you just meant that you were awkward, but I see that the problem is bigger than that. I care about you, way more than I probably should. I think about you every single day. I want you to be happy, and I really think that you can be a great person to be around when you are, Naruto said with a sigh as he prepared himself for a fight that he knew he would be battered in. What are you getting at? Hinata asked as she assessed the Jinchuriki carefully. Naruto spat blood out of his mouth and stepped forward. You push away the people who love and care for you. You keep suppressing your own personality for the sake of your ego. You enjoy being praised, you enjoy compliments, hell, you even said that you liked being carried by me. You're just as human as the rest of us. Just to warn you, I won't go away. No matter how much you hurt me, he said firmly. Hinata sighed and vanished from sight. She reappeared with her palm flattened against Naruto's stomach, and her mouth pressed to his ear. Let's see if you still feel that way after I pull you apart at the seams, she whispered in his ear. She then forced her own chakra into his abdomen and launched him backwards. Naruto hit the ground with a thud and coughed up a sizable amount of blood. He rolled onto his stomach and attempted to stand, but fell down again. Don't bother. I've ruptured your intestinal tract and liver. It won't kill you, but fighting on won't be possible, Hinata said as she appeared in front of him. Naruto growled and forced himself to his feet, the demonic chakra in his body slowly healing the detrimental wounds. That's your other problem. Assuming you know the limitations of your peers, he said before throwing a brutal, full-power punch to the left side of the corrupted Hyuga's jaw. The strike sent Hinata tumbling to the floor. The heiress clenched her teeth and leapt to her feet before rushing towards Naruto and seizing him by the shoulders. She then reared her head back and slammed her horned forehead onto his, splitting his skin and sending a spray of blood onto her own face as a consequence. Much to her shock, Naruto refused to budge. Instead, he grabbed the sides of her face and pressed his forehead into his further, deepening the wound and increasing the flow of blood from the deep punctures. What on earth are you doing? She demanded in confusion. Naruto gave her a strained smile and softened his grip on her face. I just needed to be in close contact with you. This can be over now, he said softly. Before she could reply, Naruto forced a mix of his own chakra and the fox's chakra into her body. The energy quickly began to counteract the corrupted chakra of the curse mark, resulting in Hinata's horns retracting and her body returning to its normal state. The curse markings soon began to disappear from the Hyuga girl's body, prompting Hinata to shove him away and look on in shock as her teammate dropped to his knees, completely spent from the action. The Hyuga girl was now fully normal once again, with the only remnant of the curse mark being the tattoo on the side of her neck. What have you done? Hinata whispered as Naruto heaved ragged breaths and struggled to his feet. He coughed painfully and covered his mouth to prevent blood from splattering on the ground. I suppressed the curse mark with a mixture of mine and the fox's chakra. You won't have access to that seal for a little while. It probably cut a year or two off of my lifespan, but it was more than worth it, he said. Hinata then backed up a step as Naruto labored toward her. After retreating several more steps, the heiress leapt forward and slammed a fist into Naruto's forehead, stopping him in his tracks momentarily. I still can't let you in. I won't let you, she began. Before she could finish the sentence, Naruto vanished from sight and reappeared behind her. Save it. You'll thank me for this someday, he whispered in her ear before striking a nerve on the back of her neck, rendering her unconscious instantly. He reached down and caught her before she could face plant. He then gently laid her on her back and looked to hate. Call the match, he said. The proctor made his way to Hinata and checked her body before waving his arms over her and pointing to Naruto. Hinata Hyuga is unable to continue. Naruto Uzumaki is the winner, he announced to the observing genin. The moment the result was announced, Naruto fell to his back and allowed his eyes to shift back to their natural blue color. Kakashi quickly made his way down the stairs and over to his fallen students. He knelt down next to Naruto and clenched his jaw to control his emotions. Are you alright? He asked. The blonde tried to chuckle, but only managed to hack up bloody phlegm instead. I'm feeling great, Kakashi-sensei. Like $1 million, he said as he was hoisted onto a stretcher by the medical team. The jonin followed the stretcher as it was carried away. As awful as that fight was, what you did at the end was both genius and heroic. And thank you for holding back. I know you could have ended the fight any time you wanted to, but you chose to give her a chance to vent instead. You're a great example to follow, Naruto, he said. The Jinchuriki smiled at the kind words, but lost consciousness before he could speak. Kakashi sighed and turned to return to the other ninja. Hinata, if you throw him to the wayside, you're only hurting yourself. Chapter 23, Forgiven but Unforgotten. Hinata groaned and rubbed her neck as she sat up in bed. Every part of her body was in pain, particularly her head, which was throbbing with a painful rhythm. She glanced around the room she had been sleeping in and frowned. It appeared to be a hospital room, as the walls and floors were white. There was a window by the side of her bed that was covered by a curtain. After several moments of confusion, the events of her confrontation with Naruto came flooding back through her mind. After all of that, after giving in to that sinful seal, I still came up short. Left in the dust by you again, Naruto-kun, she thought dejectedly as she laid her head back on her pillow. Her mind then wandered back to the battle itself, and the words that were exchanged. I'm willing to put aside my shameless affection for you and do everything in my power to put you down. Hinata sighed and shook her head as she dissected her own words from multiple different angles and perspectives. Of course, just as the situation is spiraling out of control, I go and say that, she thought to herself. As she recounted the brutal war of wills, a knock came at her door. The Hyuga girl sat up and glanced over at the door. Come in, she called tentatively, somewhat apprehensive as to the potential possibilities of who laid beyond the door. After a moment or two, the door creaked open to reveal the absolute last person Hinata wanted to see. You look well, Hinata. I sincerely hope that you don't feel well, though, hi, she said as he made his way into the room and over to a chair in the corner. Hello, father. I would assume that you are here to discuss some things, Hinata greeted shakily as her father assessed her from his corner chair. The clan head shook his head and sighed sadly. Skipping right to the topic at hand, HM? Admirable for somebody in your position, he muttered as he gathered his words. After nearly a full minute of silence before Hayashi spoke again. I cannot put into words how disappointed I am. You defied every lesson of morality and dignity that I have ever tried to instill into you. You hoard yourself away to a sinister, sinful power that you had no control over, and you maimed your own teammate with it. You are very lucky that Uzumaki-san has a remarkable level of self-control, because if he didn't, you would likely be in a coma, he said. Hinata furrowed her eyebrows at the statement. What do you mean? She asked skeptically. The clan head scowled at her and stood up from his chair. First and foremost, even at the peak of your power while using that seal, there was never a moment in which you were not at his mercy. Had he so chosen, he could have rendered you unconscious immediately. If I am to be honest, I wish he would have. If he had, I would not have been forced to watch my eldest daughter fall so far, he began. Hinata considered refuting his words, but thought better of it. Why would you do something so foolish? What compelled you to give in to the curse mark? Hayashi demanded. Hinata pursed her lips and exhaled through her nose. Victory. I needed it, and I needed it badly. I knew in the back of my mind that my chances against him were slim at best without use of the curse mark after the first few exchanges. I still refuse to resign myself to the idea that he truly is superior to me, and I doubt I ever will, she said. Her father gave her a hard look. It's fine to be competitive. In fact, I implore you to keep a competitive mindset. Such a thing can be extremely beneficial in moderation. What isn't fine is blowing that mindset so far out of proportion that you severely damage the people around you. Uzumaki-san's status as a Jinchuriki is the only reason he's alive right now. His body was badly damaged by the process of forcing his chakra into your body, he said. Hinata felt her blood freeze in her veins. What has happened to him? Is he okay? She asked, a renewed fear permeating her voice. Her father raised an eyebrow and sat down on the end of her bed. For somebody who claimed to enjoy the imagery of his face as a mask of blood and lacerations, you seem awfully worried about him. His current condition is your doing. As for what has happened to him, it's fairly complicated. The best way to explain it would be to say that he saved you quite a bit of trouble. As would be expected, the power of the curse mark comes at a price. It causes your body to eat itself alive in a way. Muscles atrophy, bones become brittle, and nerve endings die, he began, eliciting quiet gasps from Hinata, who wore a look of guilty horror as she pieced it all together. When he forced his chakra into you, your body was overloaded with energy for a moment. You would have died had he not absorbed a bit of the excess. That extra chakra was a portion of the chakra held within the curse mark. As a consequence of allowing that energy into his body, he suffered the side effects of your transformation. He likely knew that he was much more likely to recover within a reasonable time frame than you. That boy is much more intelligent than even I gave him credit for, Hayashi said, concluding his explanation. Hinata lowered her eyes and stared at her hands. You willingly took a beating from me just to draw out my curse mark. Then, you took away the side effects and took them on yourself. You put my needs before your own, even in the heat of battle. That selflessness will get you killed someday, but for now, you've taken my breath away. Naruto-kun, she thought to herself as the magnitude of her teammate's shrewd tactics. Where is he now? She asked quietly. Hayashi pointed a finger out into the hallway and shrugged his shoulders. Where do you think? He's just down the hall. He's required to stay in the building until tomorrow morning, but he is visitable, he said before turning to leave. Before the clan head could leave the room, his daughter called out to him one last time. What were the results of the preliminary round? And who is facing who in the finals? She asked curiously. Hayashi glanced back over his shoulder at her. Uzumaki-san is set to face Gaara of the Sand, and Neji is to face Kankuro of the Sand. Your teammate, Shikamaru and Nara, is set to face Temari of the Sand. As for the results of the preliminary round, Neji bludgeoned Kiba Inuzuka in 17 seconds, and the opponents of your cousin and teammate battered their opponents effortlessly, he explained before leaving the room. After he had left, Hinata stood up from her bed and stretched. She then walked over to a mirror sitting on her bedside table and looked at her own face. Medical ninjutsu is quite something, she thought to herself as she found that her face was virtually unmarked. She then glanced around the room for a moment before spotting a pile of clothes sitting on a chair. I must dress myself. I would rather humiliate myself in my own clothes than a hospital gown. Hinata stood in front of Naruto's hospital room hesitantly for several moments before finally finding the nerve to knock. After rapping her knuckles on the hardwood 3 times, a muffled call came from within the room. Come on in, Naruto said from inside. The Hyuga girl took a deep breath and pushed the door open before stepping inside and closing it behind her. As the Jinchuriki caught sight of her, a wide range of emotions flashed across his face, which, unlike Hinata's, was still badly marked and cut. Oh, Hinata. How are you? He asked carefully, his tone carrying a subtle undertone of apprehension. The heiress fidgeted slightly and sat herself down on a chair next to his bed, finding anything to look at but him. Quite well, all things considered. My body has healed remarkably. Medical ninjutsu is a godsend, she said as she looked herself up and down. Naruto nodded and sat up in bed, wincing as he did so. Wish I could say the same. The nurses have been telling me that the fox's chakra makes medical jutsu impossible. I kind of think they're just avoiding having to heal me. I mean, I'll heal on my own within a few days, but this still sucks, he said with a sigh. Hinata gave him a guilty look and bit her lip. I suppose you may be wondering what I'm doing here. Especially after all that I said to you, she said quietly. The Jinchuriki remained silent as he studied her carefully. You don't seem as violent as yesterday, so I'm not all that worried, honestly, he said with a shrug. The Hyuga girl glanced up at him and clenched her jaw to prevent her lip from quivering as she beheld his battered face. Look at you, battered and bloody even after the fact. All because of my own stupidity, she whispered in a pained tone. Naruto sighed and shook his head. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I understand why you feel the way you do, even if I think you took it a few steps too far. I survived, and so did you. That's all that matters. Don't stress yourself out over something that isn't important, he said. Hinata felt her limit being quickly reached. But it is important. I gave in to my darkest desires and my shameful jealousy. As a result, I hurt you psychologically and physically. I turned you into something no person should ever be. A scapegoat, she said shakily. The blonde pursed his lips. Like I said in the Land of Waves, you aren't the first, and you won't be the last. Don't beat yourself up. We all have bad days, he said. The Hyuga girl slammed her fist down onto his bedside table, causing him to flinch. But you shouldn't be the one who suffers for it. You don't deserve to be everybody's doormat. You're better than that. You're worth more than that, she said angrily. Naruto raised an eyebrow and opened his mouth to respond, but was silenced by Hinata, who put up a hand. Yes, I know. I'm being pathetically hypocritical. I said horrible, awful, no good things to you yesterday to vent my own frustrations. I'm no better than the people I'm criticizing, she said quietly. Naruto shifted a bit in place. You know, I think I finally understand why Orochimaru marked you, he said with a strange look. Hinata frowned at the statement, and motioned for him to continue. He didn't do it to lure you in like Kakashi-sensei and your dad were thinking. He did it to goad me. He somehow knew that you would use that curse mark. He also knew that you and I would end up fighting. Not sure how, but I think I'm right, he explained. The Hyuga girl sighed. Even if you are right, even if my use of the seal was all part of some master plan, I still made the choice. I still opted to throw away my morals and treat you like discarded trash. I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun, she apologized emotionally. Naruto tilted his head to one side at her words. You're still calling me Naruto-kun? Why? I thought you were just saying it to mess with me during our fight, he asked skeptically. Hinata turned red for a moment, but calmed herself and gave him a melancholy smile. Must I spell this out for you? She asked, clearly hoping that the answer to her question was a resounding no. To her disappointment, the Jinchuriki nodded. You might, he said with a chuckle. Hinata folded her hands over her chest and looked him in the eyes for the first time since her arrival in his hospital room. Despite my awful treatment of you, despite all of the insults, despite the countless times I've given you the cold shoulder, I have come to adore you. Much to my own dismay. I hate myself for it, I really do, but even I can't deny it anymore, she admitted, more to herself than Naruto. The Jinchuriki stared at her blankly for a moment before responding. So, that's what you meant when you said that you'd put your affection aside to try to beat me senseless. This is kinda hard to process, he said carefully. Hinata felt a tear finally escape from one of her eyes. I have no doubt in my mind that I've ruined any chance of you and I having a healthy relationship of any kind, be it romantic or platonic. All I've ever done is hurt you, and she began. Before she could finish, Naruto pressed a finger to her lips. Don't jump to conclusions. I gave up 2 years of my life to make sure you survived our fight. I care about you more than almost anybody else in my life. You mean a lot to me, even if I don't really understand why. I love being around you when you're in a good mood, so don't go convincing yourself that I hate you or something, because I don't. Not even close, he said. Hinata's eyes widened at one specific detail of his speech. She gently removed his hand from her face and grasped the limb tightly as though she were terrified to be without it. You weren't exaggerating. You really did cut your own lifespan down for me, she said quietly. Then, without warning, she stood up and tumbled onto the bed, latching onto Naruto and burying her face in his chest as she began to weep openly. I stole 2 entire years, 730 days from you. I've killed you in advance. Hinata wailed as she tightened her grip around the Jinchuriki. Naruto winced with pain as he was squeezed by his crying teammate, but chose not to struggle. You didn't kill me, Hinata. I made the choice to suppress the curse mark. I knew the risks, and I gambled. Sometimes you lose, and I did this time, he said reassuringly while rubbing her back and allowing her to cry. Why are you so damn forgiving? Why are you so willing to forget all that I've done? Hinata asked quietly as her tears soaked through his shirt. Naruto gently pried her off of himself, and laid a hand on the side of her face. Kakashi-sensei and Iruka-sensei care, but they have their own plans. Shikamaru, we'll get there, but for now, he's just another guy. You, as hard as it's been and as much as it's hurt, I'm still happier than I've been in years. You being kind of a stalker creeps me out, but it also makes me kind of happy to know that somebody is watching over me, he said. Hinata opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't find her voice. I guess the best way to put it is, you're all I've got. That's why I go so far for you, Naruto said honestly. The Hyuga heiress gently tucked her head underneath his chin and wrapped her arms around him again. I cannot guarantee that this will ever be easy for either one of us, but I promise that I won't do something as foolish as I did yesterday. I will never force you to give up a piece of yourself for my sake again, she said as she softly nuzzled her face into the crook of his neck. You're so bipolar. Less than a day ago, you were trying to kill me, now here you are cuddling me. Some consistency would be nice, Naruto said with a chuckle. The Hyuga girl curled up against him and closed her eyes. Duly noted. Tell me, how do you feel about me? Be honest, she asked quietly. The blonde thought for a moment before answering. I don't like you the way you say you like me, there's still some growing to do. I think I could in the future. No, I think I will. Not quite yet, though, he replied. Hinata nodded. Would you mind if I slept as we are now? The blankets in this establishment are poor, and you are quite warm, she asked. Naruto snickered. You could just come out and say that you want to snuggle. I'm willing to let you just because you apologized so nicely, he said. Hinata sighed and yawned. I'll never admit it. Never, she said defiantly before beginning to softly snore in his arms. After several minutes, the Jinchuriki closed his eyes as well. Not where I thought I'd end up today, but I guess I can live with this. Chapter 24, Slow Repair. Hanabi sighed as Hinata dragged herself into her room. The heiress had just been brutally reprimanded for her actions during the preliminary round of the Chunin exams by the elder members of their clan. Despite not having been in the room, Hanabi had managed to piece together the majority of what was discussed due to the heightened volume of the ancient clansmen. Any particular reason that you've come to my room, Nesan? She asked as Hinata closed the door and slid to the floor. The elder of the two sisters sighed heavily and drew her knees up to her chin. I would rather not smell my own perfume right now, if you know what I mean, she said. Hanabi stood up from her bed and walked over to her sister. She knelt down in front of her and sighed. I don't claim to fully understand your reasoning for doing what you did, but it was wrong, and you were punished accordingly. If you're here to sulk, then leave, she said. Hinata shook her head and leaned back against the door. Don't worry. I have no self-pity. I know what I did was awful. If I am to be honest, Father gave them a fairly favorable account of the match. I was spared a harsher punishment due to my position as heiress as well, so I have no room to complain, she said. Her sister sat down beside her and leaned back on the wall as well. Why did you give in to that seal? I just don't understand why you would do such a thing. Was it really rooted in your jealousy of his progress? She asked carefully. The heiress swallowed and wiped away a ghost of a tear from her eye as she recalled her transformation. Initially, it was because I was desperate. I despised the idea of using that seal. I knew what it was the moment I regained consciousness after being marked, and it didn't interest me at all. But once control of my fight with Naruto-kun began to slip away, my logical mind took a vacation. He was so much more efficient and slippery than he had been before. I wasn't ready. I couldn't have beaten him, she said. Hanabi frowned at one particular aspect of the explanation. Initially? Did your reasoning change as the match went on? She asked curiously. Hinata nodded and ran a hand through her hair. That seal did things to my mind. Things that I would usually find appalling were suddenly intoxicating. That shift in preference became completely impossible to resist about 10 minutes into the match. When I got a good look at Naruto-kun's face for the first time since we had been given our instructions, she said, sounding ashamed of the information she was about to reveal. He was covered in blood and cuts. He was bruised and swollen. Sounds disgusting, doesn't it? Well, to me, in that moment, It was the most beautiful thing I had ever laid eyes on. I was almost aroused by the sight of his injuries. I needed more. I needed to hurt him more. Even while my mind fell into that perverse abyss, a small part of myself was screaming for me to stop. Somehow, that small sliver of humanity made its way to the surface for a brief moment, she said, her voice wavering in strength several times throughout the account. Hanabi felt her stomach churn at the uncensored description of her sister's dark and sanguinary emotions, but motioned for her to continue. Hinata took a deep breath before obliging. Right as my body was fully taken by the curse mark, he questioned my reasoning for being so excessively aggressive and antagonizing during our match. For the briefest of moments, I saw him for who he was again. He was Naruto Uzumaki, whom I adore passionately, not a piece of meat to be minced. He deserved something resembling an explanation, so I gave him as honest a speech as I could. Within said speech, I inadvertently admitted that I desire him, she said. Hanabi winced and gave her sister a sympathetic look as she imagined how she herself would feel given the same situation. Talk about poor timing for a confession. Knowing him, though, he likely didn't hear you. What did you say, exactly? She asked. The hyuga heiress thought for a moment. I told him that I was going to bludgeon him despite my affection for him. I certainly sent conflicting signals, but it was clear enough. Also, he did hear me. He said as much after the fact, she said. Her sister raised an eyebrow. You make it sound like you've already spoke with him about this. Have you? She asked skeptically. Hinata nodded and smiled, much to Hanabi's surprise. I discussed this topic with him in the hospital yesterday. It was both hellish and heavenly at the same time. On the one hand, it was clear to me that I badly hurt him emotionally. He gave me the same speech he always does when I say something hurtful and try to apologize, which is that I am not alone in his persecution. Whenever he says such things, it tends to mean that he is suffering psychologically, she said. Hanabi nodded and awaited the rest of the story. After waiting my way through that part of the discussion, he pointed out that I was openly referring to him as Naruto-kun. Given the situation, I was forced to explain myself. I expressed to him that I harbored deep, consuming affection for him, all while wishing I didn't. He did not reject me outright. In fact, he stopped me from tearing myself down and comforted me, even though I didn't deserve it. After that, well, I tackled him to his bed and refused to let go. As it turns out, he sacrificed 2 years of his life to suppress the curse mark, Hinata said somewhat emotionally. I was about to criticize your decision to force yourself upon him, but such a sacrifice warrants a hug, Hanabi said with a chuckle. The heiress nodded and stared off into space blankly as she recalled the physical contact. What was his exact response? Her sister asked curiously. Hinata stood up and stretched. She then made her way to Hanabi's bedside table and picked up a stray pair of earrings. He told me that while he did not entirely reciprocate now, that he almost certainly would in the foreseeable future. Insurance, if you will. He also let me take a nap while essentially laying on him, which was a sweet gesture, she said as she put on the earrings. Hanabi raised an eyebrow as her sister opened the door to leave. Earrings? Have you somewhere important to be, Nasan? She asked as Hinata exited the room quietly. The heiress glanced back over her shoulder and smiled innocently. Nothing formal. Can't a girl indulge every once in a while? She asked before closing the door again and walking down the hall. Hanabi sighed and shook her head. Oh, elder sister. You're so hopeless. Naruto rubbed his throbbing head as he made his way towards his front door, which was being knocked on. While his physical had improved overnight, literally, he was still fairly uncomfortable moving around on his feet. Every step he took elicited a painful pulse in his skull. Coincidentally, the person who dwelled on the other side of his front door happened to be the source of these discomforts and pains. Good afternoon, Naruto-kun. Hinata, who was carrying a handbag, greeted jovially. The blonde felt his face heat up slightly at her casual use of the affectionate honorific in relation to his name. You're in a good mood. Did you get off easy with your clan? He asked. The hyuga girl sighed and nodded. As easily as I possibly could have. I have been assigned cleaning duty. Every night for the next 4 months, I am to clean up the dining quarters of both the branch and main houses. 8 rooms in total, she explained. Naruto chuckled. Wow, that's pretty harsh. Cruel and unusual punishment, huh? He joked. Hinata shook her head and pursed her lips. It was either cleaning or a caged bird seal. I would much rather be a maid for a few months than have my freedom taken away from me, she said. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows at the statement. I've never heard of the caged bird seal. What is it exactly? He asked carefully, sensing that the topic at hand was a sensitive one. The heiress sighed and stepped through the doorframe, prompting Naruto to step to the side and let her though. Forgive me for intruding, but I would rather keep this conversation fairly private. Not that this isn't somewhat common knowledge, but it still is controversial, she said as she sat down at his dining table. The blonde nodded and closed the door before making his way to the dining table. For starters, the seal is only given to members of the branch family. It is a precautionary measure to protect the Byakugan from thieves. The point of the seal is to destroy the eyes of he or she who bears it upon their death. The second, much more cruel purpose of the seal is to discipline members of the branch family. Should a member of the main family so choose, they can activate the seal, which, in turn, will cause them severe pain, she explained. The Jinchuriki's face contorted in disgust as he processed the details of the information that had been revealed to him. That's awful. It's almost like a form of slavery from the sounds of it, he said. Hinata nodded stiffly and put a hand on her forehead. It is one of the things I will abolish as head of the hyuga. As much as I dislike some of the members of the branch family, they're still people, and they deserve to be treated as such, she said firmly. Naruto smiled at the short speech. That's an awesome goal. Don't give up on it. You'll make a lot of people happy if you achieve it, he said. The hyuga heiress returned the smile and leaned back in her chair. I don't plan on relenting. I will likely have to walk through some fire to make it a reality, but those seals will be outlawed within my lifetime. I swear it, she said. Hinata then noticed something about Naruto's face, namely his forehead. She slowly reached across the table and outstretched her fingers to graze two small marks on either side of his hairline, where her horns had pierced him. What are you? Naruto asked skeptically as the hyuga girl slowly pulled her hand back and folded it in her lap. Those markings on your forehead. They're going to be permanent scars, aren't they? She asked quietly. The Jinchuriki sighed. Yeah, they will. I injected my chakra into you through your horns, which is why I pulled you towards me and deepened the wound. The chakra fried the skin so badly that those marks are permanent. It's no big deal, honestly. Scars are only visual, he assured her. Hinata shook her head and stood up. In a way, I mark you in the same way the main family marks the branch family. Every time you look in the mirror, you will be forced to remember the pain I caused you. I cannot control you with those scars, but I've imprinted myself on you in the worst way, she said as she made her way into his kitchen. Naruto stood up and followed her. I had to look at the scars this morning when I woke up. I didn't think of anything terrible when I saw them. What I thought of was how proud I was of surviving everything that happened. It motivated me to actually go for a run, he said as he and the heiress entered his small kitchen. Even if you find those marks to be motivational, it still hurts me to be reminded of my greatest blunder every time I look at your face, which is something I enjoy doing and do quite often, she said as she set down her handbag on the kitchen counter. The moment she had set the bag down, she realized that she had said a bit too much. She slowly glanced over her shoulder at Naruto, who was a rare shade of red. I'm glad you like my face? He said awkwardly. Under most circumstances, Hinata would have likely lost her composure and burned red as well, but this occasion was different. For what reason, she did not know. A small grin slowly spread across her lips as she tilted her head to one side and studied the Jinchuriki. You look quite nervous, Naruto-kun. Is there any particular reason for that? She asked innocently. Out of absolutely nowhere, the heiress was brimming with an alien confidence. I never said I was nervous, Naruto said defensively as he shifted uncomfortably in place. Hinata turned around and stepped forward into his personal space. Your body language says otherwise. Don't worry, I'm going to cook us a nice dinner. It's 5:30 now, so I think it's high time we ate something. Consider this my apology for blemishing your sweet face, she said with a giggle before turning and unpacking her handbag, which contained cooking supplies and ingredients. I'm going to go sit down now, Naruto said before retreating into the dining room again, leaving the heiress to herself to cook. The moment he was gone, the sudden surge of forward confidence she had experienced vanished completely. What on earth did I just do? She wondered as she activated her Byakugan to spy on the Jinchuriki, who appeared to be processing what he had just experienced. Hinata then mentally kicked herself. Wonderful. He's never been approached by either gender in such a manner, and now he's catatonic. What in God's name compelled me to do that? She thought to herself with a sigh. She then went to work preparing a simple meal of noodles and chicken. Within 20 minutes the food was cooked and ready to be consumed. I hope you like chicken, she said as she set down a plate in front of Naruto and sat down across from him. The blonde studied the food for a moment before shrugging and taking a bite of the meat. He chewed it for a moment before swallowing and smiling. Damn. Not bad at all. You're a good cook, he complimented. Hinata released the breath she had been holding and began to eat her own food. I'd like to think I am. Other than reading, cooking is one of my few hobbies, she said as she sampled the noodles. Naruto nodded and took another bite of the chicken. Are you going to be allowed to attend the finals of the exams? He asked after several seconds of chewing. The Hyuga girl sighed. I don't know. Most likely, but there are no guarantees. Father let me visit you, so I like my chances. You are set to face Gaara, correct? She asked. The excitable genin nodded once more. Yup. I just had to get paired up with the scariest guy in the room, didn't I? He said humorously. Hinata chuckled and took a sip from her glass of water. I actually think that you may defeat him more easily than you anticipate. The difference in taijutsu between you two is monstrous. Should you close range and evade his sand, you'll be able to hit him as hard and as often as you want, she said. The Jinchuriki pursed his lips. Getting around his sand is easier said than done. Lee is faster than I am, and probably still a better representative of taijutsu, and he had a hell of a tough time past a certain point. I think I'm more durable than Lee, but he's way stronger when he's using the gates, he said. The heiress sighed. Try to think positively. A defeatist mindset will lead you to exactly that, defeat. I have confidence in your ability to adjust as the fight goes on and find a way to win. If push comes to shove, you also have enormous reserves of power that you refuse to utilize against me. I think you'll be just fine, Naruto-kun, she said. The blonde glanced at her somewhat nervously. So you knew I was holding back, huh? You probably don't like that I did that, right? He asked. Hinata gazed at him for a moment. Initially, it made me angry that you didn't fight me at the height of your strength, but after reviewing the battle in my mind, I have a different outlook on the situation, she said. Naruto squirmed a bit under her stare. What do you think of it all now? He asked. The heiress finished the last of her chicken and set the plate aside. You knocked me unconscious with a single strike at the end of our match. Had you unleashed the full breadth of your power, you would have blown me into the stratosphere. It would have been even more humiliating than being beaten by you in a drawn-out slugfest. Thank you for allowing me to fight. I hate to lose, no matter the circumstances, but you made this loss much easier to accept. Both during and after the fact, she said. The blonde shrugged. I genuinely had to fight for my life once you transformed. You were stronger than I was man to man. I needed the fox to beat you. Be proud of that, he replied. The pair continued to discuss the upcoming finals and the matches that would be taking place for another half an hour before Hinata stood up from her chair and turned to leave. As much as I am enjoying myself, I must be off now. Breaking curfew is the last thing I need to be doing in my current situation, she said as she made her way towards the door. As she opened it and stepped into the hallway, Naruto called out to her awkwardly. Hey, Hinata, he said. The Hyuga heiress looked back over her shoulder at him and gestured for him to continue. Out with it, Naruto-kun. I don't have all night, she urged. The Jinchuriki smiled at her and gave her a thumbs up. I like your face, too, he said. Hinata stared at him silently for several seconds as her cheeks and ears tinted themselves pink. She then fully stepped into the hallway. That's good, because you're going to be seeing quite a bit of it from here on out. Chapter 25, Restless Children, a Troublesome Woman. Shikamaru sighed and leaned back in his chair as he grappled with the boredom that was quickly consuming him. It had been 3 days since the preliminary round of the Chunin exams, and nothing of note had happened. While many, if not all of the other nominees for the final round were preparing specifically for their individual opponents, the Nara saw no point in doing so, and as such, he had little to do. This sucks. I can't even train with my own team outside of morning practice, and my folks aren't much help because they haven't seen my opponent in action. They just want me to do my own training, I'll bet, he thought tiredly. His thoughts then wandered to his future opponent, Temari of the Sand. A long-range, ninjutsu-centric offensive dynamo who specializes in wind style. Tough riddle to crack. She just about snapped Tenten in half, and it looked like she could have done it a dozen times over without breaking a sweat. Specific preparation isn't possible. I don't have anything to work with, contemplated as he ordered himself another cup of tea from the waiter of the cafe he was sitting in. At least I don't have to fight her brother. I feel like I can figure her out given enough time, but Gaara is unsolvable for me. The difference in power is too much. Naruto might be able to beat him, but I have my doubts. Even if what he showed against Hinata was less than half of what he can really do, it may not be enough, he thought to himself. The shadow user then glanced out the large glass pane that made up the outside wall of the establishment. As he gazed out the large window, he spotted the exact reason he was eating lunch alone. Hinata, who looked quite happy, walking alongside a very tired, but quite pleasant-faced Naruto. I just don't get it. She tried to maim you, and pretty much did 3 days ago. Despite that, you've been friendlier with her than ever before. God, sometimes it feels like I should just do my own missions. They're off in their own little world. Even when they're at each other's throats, he grumbled mentally as he watched them walk past. I never took you for the sulking type. Guess looks can be deceiving. Shikamaru flinched and turned his eyes back towards the chair on the opposite side of his small table, where Temari now sat with a look of boredom on her face. The shadow user raised an eyebrow at her sudden presence, as if my day couldn't get any more irritating. I hate being snuck up on, he said irritatedly as he reached for his cup to take a sip. The sand Kunoichi shrugged and snatched his teacup away from his side of the table before downing the rest of its contents. And I hate being ignored. I've been sitting here staring at you since you started watching your star-crossed teammates. 5 minutes, just about, she said as she wiped her lips and slid the cup across the table to the lazy genin. Any particular reason you just guzzled my saliva-ridden tea? That's more than a little gross, Shikamaru asked tiredly. Temari snorted and folded her arms across her chest. Do I seem like the type of girl to care about a little excess fluid? She countered. The shadow user rested his chin on his hand and rubbed his eyes with his free arm. I haven't the slightest idea what kind of girl you are, and I don't exactly care either. We've had exactly one conversation, he replied. The sand Kunoichi held up a cluster of fingers. 3 conversations. Counting this one, at least. In the hallway, on the rooftop, and now here, she corrected. Shikamaru chuckled and leaned back in his chair, a look of amusement forming on his face. Look who's counting. Am I really that memorable? He asked jokingly. The fan wielder leaned back in her chair as well to mirror his posture, a gesture that immediately made the Nara uncomfortable. From what I've seen, you're boring as hell. What makes you even remotely compelling is that you're the first person to ever find a way off of Gaara's hit list. Pat yourself on the back, you should be proud of that, she said. Shikamaru returned to his usual hunched posture and shrugged. I didn't even do anything. It's not like I scared him off or anything. I just existed for a little while and he got bored of me. Nothing to write home about, just like me, he said through a yawn. Temari studied him for a moment before frowning. This is a little off topic, but what did you think of that match between your teammates? Because it looked to me like that could have been the end of whatever semblance of structure your cell had, she asked. The shadow user gave her a tired look. It made me angry. Hinata gave into a power she had no control over for the sake of her ego, and she was damn lucky that Naruto happened to be her opponent. He held back for her sake. He tried to reason with her. Hell, he even shaved off part of his lifespan for her to suppress the power she gave into. Our sensei also arranged the match, so I got pissed at him for that. In general, that fight sucked, he said bluntly. Temari, to his surprise, nodded in agreement, and gave him a look of something resembling sympathy. I don't know a single detail of what was going on during that match, but I do know this. The girl is luckier than she could ever fully understand. Naruto, or whatever his name is, could have just chin-checked her right away and been done with it. But no, he chose to draw it out and give her a chance to achieve catharsis, she said. The shadow user glanced out the window once more. The strangest part about this whole thing is that she and Naruto seem to be closer now than they were. I know for a fact that she apologized to him. Hell, she apologized to me for some reason. What I don't understand is how she could have changed the trajectory of Naruto's feelings by just talking to him, he contemplated. Temari chuckled. Either she did a little more than talk to him, if you catch my drift, or she and Naruto bonded during the fight somehow, she said. Shikamaru stretched and cracked his stiff neck. Hinata is many things, but a whore isn't one of them. Option 1 is more than a little outlandish. Option 2 is weird, but not all that far off from par for the course when it comes to Team 7, he said. The sand Kunoichi furrowed her eyebrows. It's a fairly simple concept to understand. When you inflict copious amounts of damage on another person all while absorbing more or less the same amount along the way, your respect for that person increases, she explained. The lazy genin shook his head. I don't get into fist fights. I wouldn't know. When I win, I do it from a nice, long distance. Taking damage has never appealed to me, he said. Temari grinned at the sentiment. You're out of luck then. I'm going to force you into a fist fight whether you want to engage me or not. Trust me, it's a boon to you. At long range, I'll fillet you, she said confidently. The shadow user sighed. Go right ahead. I don't really care about the promotion. I'm only in this so either Naruto or Hinata get a chance to become Chunin. If you blow me out of the water in 30 seconds, I'll be just as happy, because that means I can just go home quickly, he said. The fan wielder frowned. How the hell have you even made it this far? She asked bluntly. Shikamaru laughed out loud at the dumbfounded question. I have absolutely no idea. Things just tend to work out for me. I don't know what to tell you, he replied. Temari stared at him for several seconds before shaking her head and standing up to leave. As she walked away, the shadow user asked the question that had been burning in his mind. What were you even doing here in the first place? He called out as she made her way towards the door. The sand Kunoichi glanced back over her shoulder. I had orders to observe you and make preparations based on what I saw. I got bored watching you and decided to gather information the old-fashioned way, she explained. Shikamaru chuckled. And now that you've completed your mission, what have you figured out about me? He asked curiously. Temari remained silent for a moment. That you're sly as a fox, boring as a wall of dry paint, and about as driven as a homeless drunk, she said before exiting the cafe and leaving the lazy genin alone. Shikamaru followed her with his eyes through the glass pane as she walked away and thanked the waiter, who had brought him his tea. What I learned about you is that you're absolutely going to make me want to tear my hair out. A troublesome woman, that's what you are. Hanabi blew a strand of hair out of her eyes as she walked through the streets of Konoha. She had been granted a free day for the first time in months, and she had absolutely nothing to do with the free time. I guess this is what happens when you never take a break. You forget what you did before you settled into your routine. This is horribly dull, she thought to herself as she kicked a stray rock away into an alley and continued to walk. After several more minutes of aimless travel, she spotted a ripe source of entertainment. Team Ebisu, consisting of Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udan. The trio was wandering about the streets, much like Hanabi herself. Now this could be fun, the hyuga girl thought to herself as she changed her trajectory to intercept the oncoming group of her fellow academy students. After a moment, the two moving entities made their metaphorical collision. The moment they caught sight of Hanabi, Team Ebisu collectively froze. Good afternoon, Moegi-san, Udan-san, Konohamaru-san, the hyuga girl greeted, a sly grin on her face. Moegi and Udan immediately bowed and shouted back an automatic reply. Good afternoon to you as well, Hanabi-sama. They both said simultaneously. Unlike his comrades, Konohamaru made no move to bow or grovel. Instead, he gave her a glare. What do you want, Hanabi? Actually, no, why are you even out here in general? Don't you have family stuff to do? He asked bluntly. The hyuga girl's grin widened at his defiant remark. Boundless defiance, and a complete lack of caring for things such as social status. Never change, Konohamaru-kun, she thought to herself as she took another step forward. I have been given the day off. Shocking, I know. As for what I want, I would like nothing more than to wander around with you three, she replied. The group before her all stared at her blankly for a moment. Sure, if you really want to. We're not going to be doing anything exciting, though, Konohamaru said with a shrug. Moegi and Udan both looked to their leader fearfully. I have somewhere to be. My parents are expecting me home soon, Udan said quickly as he rapidly retreated. Moegi soon followed him, not bothering to give an excuse as she scurried away. The hyuga girl furrowed her eyebrows. Why the sudden surge of fear? I thought I looked quite nice today, she muttered. Konohamaru snorted and began to walk, prompting Hanabi to follow. Can you really blame them? The last time we let you tag along, you tied Moegi up in a tree with her hair and did your weird hyuga thing to Udan's legs so he couldn't walk, he pointed out as they trekked through the streets. The hyuga girl laughed a bit as she recalled the occasion being referenced. Oh, come on! Both of those things were hilarious. Even you cannot deny that, she said. The Hokage's grandson scratched the back of his head. Yeah, maybe they were, but it still wasn't nice, he said. The hyuga girl responded by stepping into him and latching onto his arm in exaggerated fashion. Then let me make it up to you. I'll be extra nice to you today, she purred as Konohamaru struggled against her grip. You're a creep, he grumbled as he was forced to allow Hanabi to cling to him. Despite the fairly hushed tone of his comment, he was heard by his pushy companion. The hyuga girl silently injected a bit of chakra into his arm, numbing it instantly. Watch your tongue, Konohamaru-san. You might lose it if you don't, she threatened lightly. Despite the dark nature of her words, her tone held no legitimate content, and the slight smile had not left her face. Could you let go of my arm? The Hokage's grandson asked irritatedly as they walked along. Hanabi shook her head and began to pull him in another direction. You'll run if I let go of you, and as much as I'd enjoy chasing you down like the prey you are, I would rather relax on my day off. Now quit struggling. I'll numb your legs next if you don't, she said as she yanked him. Konohamaru stumbled a bit as his body weight was pulled along. Where are you taking me? He asked fearfully. Hanabi grinned at his obvious apprehension and gave him an innocent look. I feel like I should bring you home with me. That way, we'll be playing in my domain, she said, eliciting a fearful gasp from the Hokage's grandson. All right. No, he said before breaking free from her grip and beginning to run. Hanabi sighed heavily and sprinted after him. After a brief race through the somewhat crowded streets, the hyuga girl caught up with him and tripped out one of his legs. Didn't I tell you that I wanted to relax today? You could at least try to be considerate, she grumbled as she picked him up from the ground and slung him over her shoulder. Unless you want me to paralyze you completely, don't struggle. Just let me have this, okay? She said as she began to walk back towards the hyuga estate. Konohamaru considered defying her once more, but thought better of it. You're really weird. Naruto told me your family is full of scary women. I guess he was right, he said. Hanabi huffed a bit at the comment. Uzumaki-san has only met my sister and I. He has no idea what he's talking about. Besides, I am much scarier than Hinata Nezen, she replied. The Hokage's grandson snickered. Keep telling yourself that. Hinata is terrifying. She even scares Naruto, he said. The hyuga girl shrugged. Uzumaki-san, unlike you, has a functioning brain. He knows who to fear and when. You, on the other hand, are as fearless as you are stupid. Which is both endearing and frustrating all at the same time, she said as she carried him through the front gates of the estate. As Hanabi walked towards the main house, somebody came out of the front door. Hanabi-sama? What are you doing? Neji, who was carrying a pile of dishes that were to be cleaned by the Branch family, asked. The hyuga girl glanced up at Konohamaru, and then looked back to her cousin. Exactly what it looks like. I am carrying Konohamaru-san into the estate in order to prevent him from escaping me today. He is quite squirmy when given space to run, she explained. Neji set the dishes down on the porch and rubbed his temples. I feel the need to point out that without having been given his consent, this is more akin to kidnapping than a simple playdate, he said. See? He gets it. Konohamaru chimed in from Hanabi's shoulder. The hyuga girl responded by dumping him to the ground and using the top of his head as an armrest. Be that as it may, I highly doubt he will press charges. Both he and I are 8 years of age, and legal action between children is uncommon, she said as the Hokage's grandson struggled under her weight. Make sure no harm comes to him, Neji said with a sigh as he picked up the dishes and went on his way. Hanabi then allowed Konohamaru to stand and dust himself off. She then clapped her hands together and smiled. Now that you're here, you're going to entertain me. So either start running, or get creative. Either one works for me, she said. Konohamaru frowned at the half-order, half-request. You said earlier that you wanted to relax. Why did you bring me here if you just want to chase me around? He asked skeptically. Hanabi giggled. That skull of yours really is hollow. I quite enjoy chasing and tackling you. I only brought you here to make sure you couldn't just disappear into a crowd of people to elude me. As I said, we're playing in my domain by my rules. Now get moving, she commanded while taking a step forward. Konohamaru needed no further hints. He took off running at full blast towards one of the property walls with Hanabi soon following. Unbeknownst to them, somebody else had occupied the open doorframe of the main house soon after Neji had left. Hayashi chuckled to himself and stepped back inside the building, closing the door behind him. Perhaps I should give them all more days off. Youth doesn't last forever. I would know. Chapter 26. Stones better left unturned. Naruto spat blood out of his mouth and cursed under his breath as he struggled to his feet to face Lee. The Jinchuriki had sought out the recently recovered genin earlier that day in order to ask for advice in facing Gaara, as Lee had nearly beaten the Sand Ninja during the preliminary round. Instead of simply explaining his process, Lee had opted to spar with Naruto. The matches had been strictly taijutsu, and the jumpsuit-wearing ninja had dominated them. He's so much faster than me. No wonder he was tuning Gaara up, Naruto thought to himself, as he readied himself for another engagement. As he stepped to go on the attack, he was buckled to his knees by a hard bunch between the eyes from Lee. As he fell to his rear end, Naruto braced himself for the inevitable follow-up. To his surprise, it never came. That's enough for today, Naruto-san. I have seen what I need to see, Lee said as he offered a hand to the fallen Jinchuriki. Naruto took the hand and rose to his feet. You're quick as hell. I feel bad for Gaara now, he joked. Lee laughed a bit and stepped back a few feet to give the blonde space to regain his bearings. You shouldn't. Whoever he is, Gaara is very dangerous, and he appears to be unstable, he said as he recalled his brutal encounter with the redhead. The excitable genin nodded and stretched out his joints and limbs. What do you think of my chances against him? He asked curiously. The jumpsuit-wearing genin winced at the question. You are a fine practitioner of taijutsu. You take small, measured steps to slide in genuinely nice counters, and you aren't terrible defensively. If you were to be locked in a small box with Gaara, you would easily dominate the exchanges and likely knock him out fairly quickly, but in open space, you aren't likely to win this fight. You simply aren't fast enough, he said honestly. Naruto sighed. That's kind of what I was thinking too. You were able to get to him by just shocking him out of the gate. I don't have that kind of raw speed. Do you have any suggestions for how I could close the distance? He asked. Lee nodded. My speed began to leave me as I tired against Gaara, so I had to find ways inside his defenses that didn't rely on my ability to simply outrun the sand. His sand is semi-sentient. It almost appears to have its own field of vision. It anticipates where you're going to go, and it adjusts its trajectory accordingly. As such, it can be confused by feints and misdirection. My ability to use the gates certainly helped, though, he explained. So in other words, I need to freak out his sand with weird trickery. That sounds kinda hard to do, Naruto said while scratching the back of his head. Lee sighed. It took every bit of my mental fortitude to not lay down and quit once I started to tire. Adjusting to Gaara on the fly is both difficult and excessively dangerous. The moment he smells blood, he attacks relentlessly. That sand also seems to be separate from his chakra supply, so he himself does not lose energy for using it, he said. Naruto then thought for a moment. Would it be possible for you to teach me how to use at least the first gate? I'm naturally a harder hitter than you are, so the boost in speed would be all I would need. Could that work? He asked. The jumpsuit-wearing ninja raised an eyebrow. I mean, no offense to you, Naruto-san, but it took years of specialized conditioning for my body to be able to handle even the first gate. We don't have the time, he said. Naruto shook his head and closed his eyes. He soon reopened them, revealing a pair of red irises. That won't apply to me. I can cheat my way around it, he said as Lee stared at him wide-eyed. After several moments of silence, the boy with the bowl cut nodded. If those eyes signify what I think they do, then your ability to allegedly walk through Hinata-san's strikes without any ill effects makes perfect sense. Let's get working then. We have much to do, he said. Naruto took a deep breath and prepared himself. This is probably going to suck. Kakashi winced as he swallowed his too hot tea. For all of his many experiences and skills, the judging of temperatures had never been a strong suit of the Jonin. As he forcefully downed the liquid, he returned his attention to Might Guy, who was sitting across from him at the cafe table, a look of amusement on his face. Perhaps we should compete to see who has a greater tolerance for heat. I may still defeat you yet, Kakashi, he joked as he sipped his far more reasonably heated tea. The silver-haired ninja sighed and set his cup down. Save till after the exams are wrapped up and in the past. The final round is in about a month, and I hate the feeling I'm getting in the interim, he said. Guy nodded and glanced out the window, as do I. Maybe I'm a bit biased, but watching Lee lose at the height of his power to that Gaara boy was more than a little jarring. No genin should have been able to survive that technique. Most chunin would have died on impact. I just don't understand it. The sand only did so much to cushion the force of the collision. That was a feat of sheer durability, he said with a shake of his head. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. You mean you really haven't pieced it all together yet? He asked vaguely. The taijutsu specialist gave his comrade a confused look. What do you mean? Something you know that I don't? He replied skeptically. Kakashi nodded and leaned across the table a few inches. Like Naruto, Gaara is a Jinchuriki. Specifically, he harbors the one-tailed tanuki, Shikaku. Suna has had control of the one-tail for the past few decades, but they've always kept the identities of their current, past, and future Jinchuriki quiet. The ability to wield sand, the unnatural physical durability, and an underlying degree of insanity, all traits of a host of Shikaku. Lee never had a chance. I'm sorry, Guy, but no matter how hard and how often Lee was able to hit him, he was never on his way to a victory, he explained. Guy clenched his jaw for a moment, but allowed himself to relax and lean back in his chair. He then chuckled a bit. I'm still proud of him, Kakashi. He still put the fear of God into that boy. Gaara felt fear. He dislikes being hit, and he dislikes the feeling of helplessness. Even if he was never close to being beaten in the big picture, he was beaten pillar to post, he said proudly. Kakashi smiled at his friend's optimistic demeanor. The pair then lapsed into silence for several moments before Kakashi asked the question that had been burning in his mind. As a person who was greatly invested in the fight between Gaara and Lee and also watched Naruto and Hinata fight, what do you think Naruto's chances are? Before you answer that, you should probably know that Naruto was operating at around 40% of his maximum against Hinata, he asked. Guy stroked his chin for a few seconds as he analyzed the information being presented to him. Should we take your estimate of Naruto's power at face value, he's still less than a fifth as powerful as Lee past the fourth gate. The one massive advantage that Naruto has that Lee doesn't is endurance. He can sustain his maximum for much longer. He's weaker than Gaara even at full strength, but he may be able to wear him down. Gaara appeared to tire from constantly forced to defend, he replied. The silver-haired ninja nodded. That was my assumption as well. Naruto likes to prepare specific things for his opponents. He had no way to know he would be facing Hinata in the prelims, but he knew he could just out-horsepower everybody but Neji, although he wasn't aware of Lee at the time. So, to make sure he would win his match, he prepared a variety of predetermined counters and maneuvers. Most of what you saw against Hinata was him running on autopilot. It was all muscle memory for him by then, he said. Guy grinned. A game planner, eh? A good trait to have. I wouldn't have expected that from Naruto, he said with an approving nod. Kakashi chuckled. He's smarter than he gets credit for. He just happens to be teammates with the two most purely intelligent people in his class, he said. The taijutsu specialist shook his head. Hinata may be a quicker study, but she isn't a smarter fighter. Naruto may have been simply firing off pre-programmed triggers, but he also adjusted them to Hinata's slight differences from Neji. He routinely changed subtle aspects of his positioning and altered his timing to poke holes in her defenses. Hinata failed to make any major adjustments at all, though some of that could be attributed to her complete lack of emotional stability during that match, he said. Kakashi winced and nodded. She was more than a little unstable. For all of her differences from Neji, and the difference in proficiency between she and her cousin, she was a much more imposing physical force once she fully gave into the curse mark. It required quite a bit of self-control for Naruto not to just blast her right then and there. I still think he should have just suppressed the seal immediately instead of drawing it out, he said. Guy downed the rest of his tea and glanced out the window again before standing up to leave. I agree. He took more damage than was necessary. There's probably more to his reasoning than we know of, but at face value, it was a foolish choice. Come, Kakashi. I hereby challenge you to a race, he said. The silver-haired ninja sighed and stood up from his seat as well, abrupt as ever. Guy. Hinata smiled with satisfaction as she observed the eighth and final dining hall of the Hyuga estate. Everything was immaculate, from the dining cloth to the floorboards. The Hyuga girl removed her maid's apron and set it aside as she glanced up at the clock. 10:45. Quite a late start, but it matters not. I have some observation to do, she thought to herself as she made her way to the front door and threw on her coat. As she exited the main house, a cold breeze blew through the night, prompting Hinata to put up her hood and jam her hand into her pockets. October is always the beginning of unpleasant weather. I might alter my schedule for it though. Naruto-kun requires guardianship, after all, she thought to herself with a giggle. She then set out through the gates of the estate into the cold night of October 2nd. As she walked through the streets, the wind began to die. Eventually, the air went completely dead. Still as a corpse, silent as a mime. This doesn't feel natural. The temperature is exactly the same. Wind chill dictates that the absence of any wind would cause the temperature to increase, Hinata thought skeptically as she approached the district in which Naruto's apartment complex stood. The closer she came to the building, the more and more uneasy she became. Soon after entering the district, she caught sight of the source of the dead winds and unnerving sense of dread. Sitting on the bench that Hinata herself had occupied on countless quiet nights was Gaara of the desert. He wore a dark, amused grin that suggested that he had been expecting her. Imagine meeting you here, he greeted in a tone of faux joviality. Hinata clenched her jaw and slowly stepped forward as a separate emotion overtook her unease. What are you doing out here? She demanded. The redhead raised an eyebrow and stood up, prompting Hinata to step back several feet. Right to the point, HM? Such impatience. Can I take in the urban scenery? I am a tourist, after all, he replied. The Hyuga girl narrowed her eyes. Care explaining why you're outside of this building? Don't be coy. It won't serve you well if you do, she asked as she forced herself to calm. Gaara glanced back at the apartment complex and began to chuckle. The chuckle soon evolved into a sanguinary laugh that echoed through the streets and alleyways. Serve me well? Is that a threat? Please tell me that it is. I'm just starved for some excitement, he asked. Hinata suddenly felt compelled to run in the opposite direction. As she lapsed into silence, Gaara's surge of excitement shifted back into stoicism. That's what I thought. If you have nothing to threaten someone with, Keep your mouth shut and your head down. Weaklings have no place at the metaphorical table, he said coldly. The heiress felt her anger surge at the comment, but pushed it down, as she knew that the entity before her was far beyond her capabilities. You still haven't answered my question. Why are you sitting idly before Naruto-kun? She began, opting not to finish the sentence once she realized that she had answered her own question. The Sand Shinobi sat back down on the bench and studied the Hyuga girl. My reasoning is quite simple. I simply wanted to see where my opponent lives. I like to be well studied when facing a new person. Especially an enemy, he replied. Hinata felt her stomach twist at the eerie similarity between Gaara's speech and something she had once told Naruto regarding her then new habit of following him home. I mean no harm to him as of now. I have no reason whatsoever to kill him. No, his blood won't be spilled for another 29 days, 8 hours, and 37 minutes. Worry not, little girl, the redhead assured darkly. Hinata took a step forward once more. And why should I believe a word from your wretched mouth? She snapped. Gaara gave her an amused look before responding. Let me answer your question with another question. Are you really any more trustworthy than I am? Should you be given the benefit of the doubt? Given what I recently discovered, I don't think you should be allowed to come to this building. Especially at night, he asked. Hinata scrunched up her eyebrows at the question. What on earth are you talking about? You don't know a thing about me. And even if you did, you would find that I'm perfectly trustworthy, she said. The redhead chuckled. As surprising as it was that you gave into that seal on your neck, it made for excellent entertainment. Your match became much more violent, and better yet, your emotions became raw and uncensored. Readable is an understatement, he said. Hinata's eyes narrowed as the redhead spoke. I don't know if it's a universal ability of people like myself, but I've always had the ability to detect negative or sinful emotion. When you gave into that seal, the entirety of the arena became flooded in your pathetic teen angst. Out of curiosity, I decided to delve into them and take them apart. And let me tell you, what I found was fascinating, he said as he began to file his nails with a kunai. Hinata opened her mouth to respond, but found that it was dry and paralyzed. I knew what to expect, generally speaking. Plenty of anger, multiple different forms of jealousy, and an ocean of self-loathing. What I didn't expect was the underlying flavor of lust that permeated it all. Even for a person like myself, that's a bit extreme, he said. Hinata's hands tightened into fists in response to his outlandishly harsh accusations. You don't know what you're talking about, she said firmly. Gaara grinned at her defiant confidence and began to speak again. Your tone of voice is a dead giveaway. Back to the point, the fact that one of your primary emotions when battering Naruto was lust points to a dark underbelly to that queenly demeanor you maintain. Given that your eyes have the ability to see through solid objects, it would stand to reason that one of your reasons for coming here is more than a bit perverse, he said. The Hyuga girl burned red with indignation as he spoke. Now, even if you weren't planning on going beyond simple peeping, there are no guarantees that you wouldn't lose your patience and imprint yourself on him. Sexual assault is a felony, you know, Gaara mocked. Hinata gritted her teeth and threw a punch towards the Jinchuriki's face, but missed by a mile as her arm was redirected by a tendril of sand. You're digging your own hole. All I've done is give you a shovel, Gaara said as he stood up and began to walk past Hinata, who was shaking with anger. After several moments of walking, the redhead glanced back over his shoulder at the heiress. You and I are quite similar. Whether you choose to acknowledge it or not is entirely up to you, he concluded with finality. The Jinchuriki's footsteps gradually grew quiet as the seconds ticked away. Once he was entirely out of earshot, Hinata released the breath she had been holding. As she collected herself, she uncurled her fists. Her nails had dug into her palms and drawn specks of blood. She gazed down at the red pinpoints and pondered the turbulent conversation that had just occurred. Why did that bother me so much? Nearly all of what he said was foolhardy, but still, she thought to herself. Her gaze was then drawn up to the window of Naruto, which was closed to shield against the night wind. I meant him no harm, none at all. Though I would certainly be lying if I said I wouldn't enjoy him. With consent, of course, she mused. The moment the thought had crossed her mind, the heiress shook her head rapidly and tore her eyes away from the window. I'm not in the right place mentally to be staying out so late. Not at all, she admitted to herself. She then cast one last glance up to the dwelling of her teammate before turning her back and beginning her trek home. Good night, Naruto-kun.